What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with our next installment of the Warhammer Combat Cards Warlord Guides, and I cannot tell you how excited I am about this one. This is the one for Lelith Hesperax, who I consider the strongest Warlord in the game. We talked about Canoness not too long ago. She's extremely good and probably the most powerful, but Lelith has the other advantage of being much more controlled. You have a lot more control of how her ability triggers and when, with an extraordinarily powerful ability, and none of it relies on your cards dying, and also is not random, where, just to double down on that point, where Canoness is quite random, and you can get that worst case scenario turn where nothing goes right with Canoness, and you lose a match you should have won. She's easier to play against, just because you can kind of cheese the ability, because the AI doesn't necessarily take full advantage of it. But let's go ahead and talk about that real quick. First of all, she's got pretty solid stats, decent health, it's on the low side, and at 29 points cost, she's getting into the more expensive warlords. So these are the warlords where they have to really contribute something to the game, either themselves, but usually not at this cost point, or through their trait and abilities. So we've got Outflank, which is great, and we've got Furious Charge, which is also good. If you hit level 9, you get that Furious Charge, and that combo is great with her. And I am super excited that I just hit that. As you can see, just hit that. Only one copy over that level 9. But she's really getting scary at this point. But the secret sauce with Lelith is her ability, which is when a friendly Aeldari card kills an opposing card, return it to your hand up to a maximum of 2 times. So you get first deploy and then 2 redeploys. So any card that has an on-deploy ability can trigger it up to 3 times in a Lelith deck. Now, already that should kind of get your wheels turning about what you can do with this, like your Precision Shot, your Furious Charge, your Shields, which will recharge your Taunt. There are a bunch of different ways to kind of build this out to make an extremely powerful deck. And the kind of standard build for Lelith includes several cards you're gonna see a lot. One you see quite a bit is gonna be this guy right here. Of course, having very good stats and a really high melee attack. The key on this guy is Furious Charge, because he'll hit really hard for Furious Charge, may kill something and redeploy, and you'll be able to do it again, or if not, you'll probably soften something up to the point where you can kill it again. And even if he doesn't, say he gets stuck on the board by a taunt or a shield or something, you still have that death blow to rely on where he's always going to do damage in a meaningful way. Great piece, costs 30 points, still are 33 points, but a great piece to consider in there. Being legendary, he's somewhat more rare, but also an older card, so most players have a copy of him at some point. If you don't, keep an eye out for him. Another very common card you'll see in this is probably already in my deck. A couple others I do consider. If you want a very thin, hyper-aggressive deck, the Incarn is another really great piece to put in there. Doesn't have an on-deploy ability, but has an extremely high attack value, so it's more likely to get those deploys by getting opposing kills. Because the whole thing with Lelith is you want cards that hit extremely hard so they can benefit from her ability, and you're very aggressively clearing out your opponent's decks to get through to kind of the Warlord and pull them early. Because it is a hyper-aggressive playstyle. She can run out of steam once you get your redeploys done, or if you accidentally lose a key piece early on. So that's where the Incarn is both good and bad. He's good because if he hits really hard and is very durable, but he's bad because he is so expensive that you're likely to have a fairly thin deck around him. Now, Lelith is at the lower price point to where you can actually include the Incarn, so it's not the worst build. Also, a note on redeploying, that also recharges Endless, I believe. So if he gets a kill, if he loses a life, gets a kill, and then is drawn back to your hand and you redeploy him, I believe he redeploys with Endless Recharge, but I could be wrong about that. I haven't actually tried it. I'm now second guessing myself, but give it a try. Even if he doesn't get that back, you still get to redeploy him a couple times without losing him completely, which you would with some of the other cards that I am going to talk about. Another thing about that redeploy, and we'll talk about this more when I actually play some games in a second here, it's not just redeploying that card. It's anytime you deploy a new card, you can also move your board around. So you can reposition your existing cards as well as playing down the new cards, which is a benefit by itself. A couple other ones, of course, all your outflanks are going to be extremely powerful, and all your readies will be powerful as well. So I think he's outflanked too, isn't he? Yeah, okay. So even if you did a melee deck, someone like Karendras, who comes in with both outflank and melee ready, if you have a melee-focused deck, this guy's a great piece to put in there once he gets those 2 traits, or even if you just have the melee ready. That will charge up over time, multiple times, and he's got the decent attack stats to back it up. Going on through Medicae, of course, being a great one, because you will get to Medicae multiple times, which is extremely frustrating when you play against it. yeah, target acquired, shields. These are all cards you see very commonly in here because they will, again, trigger multiple times. And even if Endless doesn't recharge, shields do. And I'm going to talk about my deck too. I'm just highlighting the ones in here that I don't have in my deck. This one, of course, 13 points, very high melee damage and Furious Charge. Really great combo of abilities there. This all is just, you can just see a ton of possibilities. So just to talk about, again, most of the decks you will see that use Lelith have a combination of melee and range, so you kind of mix up your attack types a bit. For me personally, by far my favorite way to build Lelith is really leaning in the strengths of the Eldar faction as a whole, which is ranged. It is a shooty McShooterson faction, particularly with these two here being some of the best range cards in the game by a fairly significant margin, helped by the high hit points and ranged ready of this guy, helped in additionally by the stick in the mud fear of this guy, who can redeploy, but usually I use this guy as a defensive piece to kind of block up a lane and allow my heavier hitters to do some work. But he is still doing attacks in the primary stat that I'm attacking with, so he has an offensive benefit. Likewise, this guy is much cheaper, but does a surprising amount of damage, especially for 6 points. And if you use this guy as a finisher to kind of clean up injured cards, you can redeploy him multiple times as well. Great for shield clearing, great for finishing off Akaran cards, really good piece. And then I kind of close it out. I've got this guy in here to protect my big hitters. And an interesting piece about this is Taunt is also one of those abilities that will refresh. So if you want to protect some injured cards, you play this guy down. He can either die and keep them alive, or he does have the chance to soak a bunch of damage, do a pretty hefty melee hit, enough that it'll actually get a kill, and then redeploy, and then you can play him again. So you can actually get multiple uses of Taunt out of this guy. He comes in at a higher price point, does not combo with my main attack type, but has that chunk of hit points and melee damage to actually be useful. And even if you're shooting, this melee ready can help charge up your Lelith attack. Or this guy, who I also use as a pure defensive piece with those shields, just holding down a lane. But he also can pull off kills if you're against a melee deck. And if he gets a kill, comes back, gets to redeploy for your shields again. Also doesn't do attack in my main attack stat with ranged, but he does have the ranged debuff ready, so even if I'm shooting with my other cards, against another shooting deck, this guy has an extra defensive benefit that's really nice. And of course, I talked about Lelith herself. We looked at her, does not have a ranged attack, does have Furious Charge, and can also redeploy herself. So you can deploy her early to get some kills and not risk having her on the battlefield later. So that's one of the cool things that makes her just really dynamic and interesting, especially once you get that Furious Charge unlocked. Obviously, all of this kind of points to Lelith being level dependent, because she benefits a lot from those secondary traits, extra traits, high-leveled cards. She's pretty tricky to get into, but can also be very effective at early level as well, because she lets you get the most out of your most powerful hitting cards. So I've talked a bunch, let's go ahead and jump into the game. Lelith being so powerful and so kind of rare in play, I wanted to spend a little extra time talking about her and the decks, and also my deck being a very unusual build, I wanted to spend some extra time talking about it. This is good. I am actively laddering with Lelith or with Aeldari, so you will see some somewhat tougher matchups here. Starting with the high hit point ranged ready to go ahead and prepare, because it was my best draw on a bad draw. Oh god, that's awful. Bad draw. Best draw on a bad draw. Ooh, bummer. Perfect. All right. Oh, you jerk. Now, the good news here is my double... And I've got a higher rank outflank because that guy's practically max level. The good news here is my double attack on drop really helped kind of soften this guy up, so we'll get some meaningful damage here. This is a risk... So this is great. I'm going to talk through this. So I've got mostly flyers and jet bikes and fast cards, so I do tend to move first, which is great to get that alpha. And that double ready is really nice. Now here's where it's a gamble though, because that's going to hit really hard, and that's a thin Shazot deck, so I can pretty much guarantee that in that deck there is going to be a long strike as well, which I do not want to hit my Crimson Hunter. But we'll go ahead and do this. Because the great thing is I can get the kill. I will take a hit back from that, whatchamacallit. But at the same time, I then will be able to redeploy my cards. And we're going to go ahead and do this to give Seth Buin a chance to actually finish that guy off. Okay. And then we'll go here, 2. Now, Mogan Ra is going to take quite a bit of barrage damage. Ooh. No, he's not. Oh, I love it. So that kept Morgenrath from taking any damage. And also you can see the Vizark survived. And he's going to be up for taunt. He's going to absorb the first attack again on my turn as well, which is fantastic, unless Longstrike drops. Okay, good. If Longstrike had dropped, his attack on arrival could very realistically have taken down the Vizark before we even did any shooting here. But as it stands, okay, cool. So I got lucky here. Played extremely risky, but that's another thing I really like about Lelith is she rewards aggressive, risky play because you have the chance to adapt, you have the chance to retry and move stuff around and kind of get crazy. And the Vizark, I tweaked this deck a lot and tried a whole lot of different things just to kind of get in there and figure out how to play it. And see, I'm still pulling off the Crimson Hunter, and it's done so much damage over the course of this game. God, it's good. Especially once you get to this point. Now, of course, the outflank is wasted because it's already debuffed, but, oof, man. And here you'll also maybe notice that the majority of my cards are range-focused and have the extra range attacks, but for situations exactly like that, I do also like to sprinkle in ones that do have a melee attack so they can clear shields and do damage defensively, like I just did there. So I cleared a shield and was able to get that lethal a little bit faster, which didn't matter in that game, but it can in some others. So there's one game we're going to play another one just to see it. But hopefully that really illustrated both the kind of mechanics of Lelith herself in play and then also kind of the advantages of the deck that I put together, because I'm very proud of it. Any second now? Yeah, okay. And you may have noticed that my Warlord guides are going out roughly in order of cost. I'm getting through it. Hopefully I'm going to finish them out pretty soon. Trying not to post more than one a day because I don't want to be overwhelming on that. So if you are watching this, it's probably about a week from when I actually recorded it. Oh no. Okay, this is perfect. Because one of the things about Lelith that I may or may not have actually mentioned already is that she can kind of run out of steam. If you use up your redeploys, you lose your key cards. Oh god, that's an awful draw. It can definitely kind of add up, and you end up running out of hitting power before the end game. Particularly, wow, that was terrible. Okay, and there's the downside of running a max deck with all of the possible upgrade cards I could get. And also I'm going second in this one, so he's got some fast cards in there. I'm actually pretty surprised I went first against that Tau guy, because they were all flyers. That usually would be a very low card count deck. Now let's see if this works. I may actually hit him in melee. Yeah, I'm going to do it. We'll just pull that Vizark back to my hand. Now, positive and negative to that. Vizark comes back to my hand, but that also removes the taunt protection I had from my other cards. So when you are getting your redeploys, if you're counting on a card to be there to soak up some damage, note that it may not end up being there. But yes, as I was saying, in terms of Lelith running out of steam, going up against Rakarth is a nasty matchup because he's got the ultimate attrition. He just builds up a bunch of hit points and then it takes so long to clear those cards that you can end up losing just because you run out of stuff to do damage. And that's especially true with Lelith because you can lose your power cards. They are pretty squishy. But yeah, I should be okay on this one. I'm making some very nice aggressive progress. Ooh, I don't like that. And you can spend your cheaper cards, like my 6-point dude there, to help, and that will still trigger the outflank. The animation's just a little bit off. You can spend your cheaper cards to go ahead and keep your heavy hitters alive, which is a very successful strategy. But you want to be very careful doing that because you don't want to run out of chaff cards and still have a bunch of scary stuff left on the board. And here I'm going to go ahead and put my shield to hold this guy down. Put the extra durable one here because it's going to take a while to get through Jane Czar. And this is my final deploy with my... we'll go ahead and do this. I'm not using my final deploy of the Crimson Hunter yet. That's a gamble. Could be good or bad. We'll see. But I'm not doing it because I want to make sure that I have it later. Ideally, I have her in the end game, or Sathbuin, whatever it is, in the end game to kind of help punch through Rakarth's final hit points because they're... Yeah, okay. So I should be good in this one. This is a very scary deck, but I've got so much hitting power. What's your melee damage? 59? Yeah, okay. That I should be able to take these guys down. Now, that was probably a mistake. I didn't really think that all the way through, and Sathbuin will not redeploy again. And he's still got another card in the deck that is not Rakarth, and most of the cards I've seen so far are fairly cheap. So there's probably another nasty surprise in there. I do still have Sathbuin on the table, so may survive longer, but I do also have... okay, that's not so bad. I do also have Mogan Ra in the wings. Ah, but there goes my Crimson Hunter. That's a bummer. And you can see I'm steadily losing shields on my... what's his face over here? I will hold the taunt card. But this guy, I'm losing shields on him, but he's still there. Hasn't taken any actual damage on health. And is still doing meaningful damage here. And here I will get a chance to really ping Rakarth multiple times. And I've been lucky with my shield card. I haven't even needed to pull him back. And here's where it can get a little iffy. Because I want to hit... And this is a fairly low-level Rakarth, so I got lucky. He's only got trait level 2. Does not have regen yet, so while he's still a lot to chew through, it could be worse. And that's the last shield on that guy, so I'm going to have to start getting creative here. But one of the things that's great about this build is it's, again, very heavily ranged focused, so it does a ton of burst damage. Has a decent amount of durability. None of these cards are super low hit points, and I've totally got them. But then also that shield card is really critical to have in here. The most common shield card to see in a Lelith deck is going to be the Shadow Seer, because it does get the psychic attack, it's got that outflank, but it's multiple points more than the Clay Vulture. So once you get this guy to rank 3 shields, I actually think he's a better piece in here. I just found that over the course of my, especially upper tier competitive games, I just wasn't getting the mileage I needed out of the Shadow Seer. Like, the Shadow Seer has more attack types, but has such low attack value, it's unlikely to actually redeploy very often. And has less durability, and again, costs more. So I get more mileage out of Clay Vulture than I ever did out of the Shadow Seer. But the Shadow Seer is the one you're going to see a lot more often in your Rakarth deck, or in your Lelith decks. So that's why I built mine the way I did. It's after a lot of experimentation. I play with Lelith a lot because she's one of those warlords who's just really exciting, keeps the game interesting, and is one of those ones who really rewards human play. Where if you are looking at the game, considering what to do, she's got the most capacity to react to what your opponent does because of being able to play cards multiple times and redeploy your board on your terms. Because unlike Creed, you're not losing cards to trigger that. You're actually killing cards to do it. So hyper-aggressive, very flexible, very fast, just a super, super fun warlord. And hopefully I have sold you on her as the greatest warlord of all time. That's it. Yeah, enjoying doing these guides. Let me know if you have any feedback. I will get them done at some point, and then I'll probably do a slightly slower release schedule of Warhammer combat cards stuff, and I'll focus more on the campaigns and the actual missions going on, again, once this is done. But yeah, until next time.